Hey everybody, this is Spencer Plank. I'm doing my presentation on developmental and family life cycle theory. So to introduce it, originally, developmental and family life cycle theory was based on the research of Duvall and Miller and focused on the nuclear family that included a husband, wife, and children. And then it was later added upon by McGoldrick to include other family types. So it's based on the idea that families develop in stages and therefore there are predictable ways that changes that might affect one family member will affect the family as a whole. And you can kind of think of it as kind of like Erickson's stages of development, kind of similar to that, but for the family instead of for a child or a person. Description. In this model, they define a family as a married man and a woman originally, and they called that the nuclear family. It was later expanded upon by McGoldrick to include, for example, LGBTQ plus couples, divorced couples, and they changed the term to immediate family. Basically, it explains that families go through different stages. For example, to use the original model, use a couple that gets married, and then eventually they have kids, and eventually those kids grow up, and then those kids leave the house, and then the parents are left at home by themselves like empty nesters, and they move on into retirement, and then they pass away. So those are like the basic steps of the cycle, and yeah, it was added upon by McGoldrick, but it's kind of goes through the steps of what a family might go through during a lifetime. So we can see here, this is a diagram of the nuclear family. So like I said before, you have a married couple, and they establish a relationship, and then they move on to having kids and adjusting to pregnancy and the changes that they have to make becoming a mother and a father. And then the kids move on to school, and the kids start to develop and grow up, and then move on to school age and adolescence, and then later getting ready to go off to college or start a career, whatever that might look like. And then the middle-aged parents, they start to refocus on their marriage and their relationship, being back together again without the kids in the home, and then moving on to retirement and becoming grandparents. Now, another model that McGoldrick developed is, so not things don't always work out and couples get divorced. So this kind of goes through some of the things that a family might see when going through divorce. Kind of talks about what the kids might have to go through, going back and forth between mom and dad if they have split custody, staying connected to extended families, the sadness and the stress of not having your original family anymore. So these are kind of some of the things that this model talks about. And next, we'll talk about what this has to do with nursing, why this is important. So in general, this model gives nurses a way to predict what kind of stressors a family might be experiencing. At each stage that they go through, there's different changes, different challenges that people in the family might experience. So this can give us a way to assess what milestones the family may or may not be at. And one kind of setback, like I said before, is the original model doesn't take into account every kind of family type. Sometimes grandparents end up raising kids. Sometimes they're step parents. There's a lot of different things that a family can look like. So to talk about environment, it doesn't necessarily directly talk about environment other than kind of like in a general way. it does talk about heterosexual couples living in the same home and how that they might have to deal with certain things. But I mean, to bring up the example of divorce, a change in environment for the kids could be stressful, could cause certain things, maybe behavior changes, depression, acting out, things like that. So next is health. So while this theory doesn't necessarily directly talk about health, if we're talking about different stages and different stressors that people go through, this could lead to certain diseases, certain difficulties. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but they have two different stressors, normative and non-normative. So a normative is kind of like that linear line of the stages of development. If you go through that, that's what's considered in this model normal, where a non-normative example here would be like the early death of a spouse, where you might expect the husband to make it till he's 70, 80, he dies at 40. So that would be a kind of stressor, a non-normative stressor. But knowing these types of things about our patients might help us give some insight into, the husband dies, the wife might be depressed or have stress and anxiety raising the kids by herself, and things like that. Now, to discuss some research that actually used this model, DePapp and Lindsay studied the application of the family life cycle theory to parents of children with autism. Now, they were able to find some common things amongst parents caring for autistic children. The study found that many parents felt blamed for their behavior, for the behavior of the child and the symptoms of their children by healthcare professionals. This may mean that more providers need training on autism to adequately diagnose and treat autistic children rather than blame the parents for how the child is acting. Next, they were also able to use DFLCT to study the impact on daily life, the finances, career, impacts on the parents, impact on the spouses, impact on siblings, and what that did to the family trying to take an autistic child out into public. And one of the main things they found that many parents struggled with all of these things in different ways, but many of them maybe didn't feel they had the support to manage the child. So, autistic kids might have temper tantrums in public, things like that. And so we as healthcare professionals, if we're educated, we can give advice to parents to help manage those kind of behaviors and things in a positive way that can help take some of that stress of trying to take care of an autistic child. Next, Burge used DFLCT to study the effects of stressors at different stages of family development to see if there's an association between stressors for adolescents and an increased rate of eating disorders. And they found that there may be a correlation to stressors at different stages and increased rates of eating disorders. So if the healthcare provider is aware that the family is going through certain things at different stages for the adolescent, they might be able to intervene and give education to the parent to give proper support to the kids so that they are less likely to develop an eating disorder. So these are just two examples of how this model has been used to show that it can provide better outcomes for patients and give providers an insight into how they can help their patients. So in conclusion, while DFLCT may have some limitations to taking into account all the different family types, it can still be used as a general tool to assess the needs of the patient and It's been used in research and been applied to create interventions, and we should use it because it gives us a general knowledge of how families might work. So thanks for listening to my presentation, and here are my references. Thank you.